Hey T-Heads, this is Don from Mayleaf and welcome to the third episode of our Foundations of Tea series. I'm joined again by Halter.
Hi guys.
And she's been studying along with you, hopefully. We've done 2 lessons so far. The first lesson we dealt with the leaf.
Yep.
And the second lesson we dealt with the producers. And really sort of how production changed the different types of tea. Remember all of the different types of tea?
Yeah, don't test me on them, please.
Don't worry, no tests, no pressure at all. So today, we are now going to be focusing on you, the brewer. Okay, so there's a Chinese saying, which is that tea requires 3 things. It requires leaf, it requires water, and it requires you.
Okay.
The brewer. Okay, yeah. There's another saying in China, which is that you can't make good tea out of bad leaves, right? But you can make terrible tea out of good leaves, right? So you can ruin good tea.
I've done that a couple of times.
I'm sure we all have, right? So hopefully by the end of this episode, you're going to get a better understanding of sort of the choices that you have to make and some guidelines. And it is guidelines because first of all, it's down to taste.
Okay.
And secondly, it's very deep. This can go, just like everything in tea, there's a lot of geekery.
Right.
We've done master classes where I've spent like hours talking about where to pour the water and stuff like that, right?
Sounds like you.
She knows me well. But so this time, we're just going to strip it back and we're going to simplify it.
Good.
And we're going to just focus on sort of the key decisions that you have to make. And essentially, you have 3 decisions, right?
Yeah.
Of course, you need to choose good leaf and all the rest. But assuming you've got some decent leaf in front of you, you've got 3 decisions. Number 1 is how much leaf to use.
Okay.
Number 2 is what's the temperature of the water.
Right.
And number 3 is how long you let it brew for.
Okay.
Right.
But what about the equipment in terms of the teapot?
I said I didn't want to go geeky. You can go there if you want.
Okay, we'll focus on the practicals.
You focus on the practical first. We'll just deal with this side first. Yes, TEAWARE is very important and all the other things. But really, it doesn't matter which TEAWARE you've got, you're always going to have those 3 decisions to make.
Okay.
And they will all sort of affect each other. So if you use more leaf, that's going to affect how much time you're going to brew it for and temperature. So it's sort of, imagine like a triangle. Every time you move one point, you're sort of shifting the others. Because ultimately, they all relate to strength, right? So if you use more leaf, it's going to be a stronger tea.
Okay.
If you brew it for longer, it's going to be a stronger tea. And if you use hotter water, because that extracts quicker, it's going to be a stronger tea.
That's right, okay.
Right? But there's different types of strength, and that's sort of what we're going to talk about today. So you can sort of understand it a little bit more clearly. And in order to do that, I want to sort of give you an analogy, and that analogy is music.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So imagine you have an orchestra, right? The leaves are the musical instruments. Right?
Yeah.
So if you have some shoddy musical instruments, it doesn't matter how good the musician, you're not going to play good music, right?
Yeah.
The musicians are the producers.
Okay.
Okay, so you're taking good instruments and you're putting them in the hands of good musicians. They're going to be able to make good music. Okay. Right? The brewer is the conductor.
Right, interesting.
So you are the conductor of the orchestra.
Okay.
Okay? And so all of the parameters that I just talked about have an analogy in this idea of an orchestra. Okay. So the amount of leaf that you're using, so the leaf to water ratio, so obviously it's not just the amount you're using, it's compared to how much water, right? So it's leaf to water ratio.
Yeah.
So the leaf to water ratio relates to strength, but it relates mostly to richness. Right? So the example that I'd like to give you is, for example, imagine that you're the orchestra, you're the conductor of an orchestra, but the orchestra is very small. You've got 3 violinists, versus 12, right? The smaller the orchestra, the louder they're going to have to play, right?
Yeah.
And you're never going to get the same richness as if you had like a 12-piece or a 24-piece orchestra, right?
But I always associate strength and richness with this being the same thing.
But it's not quite the same thing. So imagine, for example, if you took that 3-piece violin and you recorded a piece of music, and you took the 12-piece and you recorded a piece of music. The strength is like the volume, how loud you're listening to it, right?
Okay, yeah.
The richness is how rich it sounds.
Right, okay.
Right, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
How much sort of rich is difficult to describe it any other way.
I guess the various instruments that add to the sound of the music.
But even if it was the same instrument, imagine taking one violin and 12 violins, right? Even if you turned up the volume of that one violin to match the same volume as the 12, it's not going to have the same sound, right? Richness is about the density of the sound. Do you know what I mean? Rather than just the volume. Okay?
Yeah.
So in this analogy, the amount of leaf to water ratio is the size of the orchestra.
Okay.
Right. And then in terms of time, in terms of how long you're brewing it for, that's how loud you're getting them to play.
Okay.
Okay? Fine. So that's the volume knob, or if you're a conductor, you are basically, asking them to play louder.
But when you leave it too long, is then the orchestra completely ruined because you've left it for too long?
Well, yes. So basically, in this analogy, imagine you've got 3 violinists and you want them to play at a certain volume so that the person at the back of the symphony hall can hear, right? They're going to be like going crazy, right? And that means they're going to run out of steam much quicker, right? Whereas if you've got lots of violinists and the person at the back wants the same volume, they have to play individually much quieter, right? And that means that, they can last for longer. So they can go through more infusions, right? So the leaves can go through more infusions if there's more of them. If it's less, then they're going to run out quicker. And as you say, if you push it doesn't matter how much leaf, if you push it too far, it's just going to become too loud and too distorted, right? So it's like turning up the volume too loud, it's just going to become distorted, right? So let's just deal with those 2 parameters. We'll deal with temperature later. Okay, so there's sort of 2 styles of brewing. One is called Western style and one's called gongfu style. And even though they seem to be separate things, it is a spectrum. So you could sort of go in between, right? And so Japanese style brewing is sort of in between, right? And the main difference between them is the leaf to water ratio.
Right. Oh, okay. That's all. Not the instruments necessarily.
Well, I mean, so less instruments versus more instruments, right? So in front of us, we've got 2 teas. This is 2 black teas. This is little tongmu. And this is pretty much how much you would put in this container if you were brewing Western style. Okay. Right? And that's how much you'd be putting in if you brewed gongfu style.
So Western style, is it effectively just doing it once?
So, yes, you're right. So basically, as you reduce the amount of leaf that you're putting in, it's just like the violinist, they're going to run out of steam quicker. So you're probably going to get 1-2 infusions out of it. Western style is designed for pretty much 1 infusion. But you can stretch it a bit, maybe get 1 or 2, 3 infusions out of it. Whereas this one here, you'd be brewing 7-8 times. Okay.
So how would you decide, is this basically I just want to drink or 2 and this is like I want to drink a while with a lot of other people?
Right. So exactly. So basically, I would always suggest, and I'm always this is my mantra to everybody out there, use more leaf, right? Because it gives you a richer brew, right? And it's not about just volume or strength. It's about the density and the texture and all of the characteristics of the violins or the leaves in this case are represented. Whereas if you're using a small amount of leaf, it's going to be harder for the tea to express itself, right? However, if you know that you've got to run out of the house because you've only got time for 1 tea, then it makes sense to brew a bit more frugally in a Western style because you're only going to get 1 drink out of this and then you're going to go. Fine. So, if you're planning to only do a quick brew, then yes, you're probably going to use less leaf. Although I would still recommend doing that, and then when you come back home, you can brew it again.
How long can that be left before you can brew it again?
It can be left longer than you think. So, I mean, we've done tests and you can even leave it overnight and come back to it. And yeah, it's been impaired a little bit, but it still tastes good. So, don't be afraid of keeping your leaves as long as you sort of take all the water out and just let it sort of take the lid off, it steams off. Yeah, so you want to sort of dry it out, essentially. Okay. So, yes. One of the reasons why you might pick Western brewing is because of the fact that you've got a rush, right? Another reason is if the leaf is very broken, and in the case of tea bags, that's right, very broken leaf. Because if you're putting a lot of very broken leaf in a pot, even like the time it takes me to pour the water in and then, put the lid on and pour it away, it's still going to be overbrewed. Right. Because the purpose of broken leaf is to brew very quickly. It's convenience versus taste, right? So those are the two reasons why you may want to err more on the side of Western style brewing, but pretty much I would always recommend go for more leaf, shorten your brewing time, and then brew more infusions.
Okay.
That's the best way to get the most out of your leaves and to really understand the character of the tea, not just in terms of taste and aroma, but in terms of sense, like texture as well, and the body changes. Everything changes as you build up richness.
Fine.
So we're going to do this test now. I'm going to brew these both, and obviously because this is less leaf, I'm going to brew it longer.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to sort of do it by feel.
Is it proportional to, for example?
Yeah. So in general, and it depends on the tea, so it's always going to have some variations, but in general, it's around 6 times more.
Okay.
Right? So this is about 1.5 grams, and this is
Yeah.
about 8 grams, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah? All right, so we're going to pour this in, and we're going to let that brew. So that would be what you would sort of normally get at like a English hotel, right?
Yes.
High tea.
Yeah.
They'll brew that for like 3 minutes, right?
Okay.
But this one here, we're probably going to be brewing for about 20 seconds.
Right.
So the difference is
Yeah.
very big. And I should say, towards the end of this video, I'll put up some guides,
Okay.
so you don't have to remember like
Yeah.
the times, so you can sort of. But I just want to give you an idea of the concept behind it.
Okay.
So. Less violinists, more violinists, right? And you're the conductor, you're basically saying, I want a bigger orchestra or a smaller orchestra. Okay, so I'm going to leave this for a couple of minutes.
Okay.
And you can also, I should say, this, I'm just giving you the basics on hot brewing.
Yeah.
You can also do cold brewing with tea.
Okay.
Where you would basically take leaves and pour cold water over them.
Right.
And you can also do what's called grandpa style, where you're basically leaving the leaves in the water. But they're only suited for very particular teas. And it's kind of advanced.
Old
so
school.
It's cool.
Well, obviously I should learn all about that because I'm advanced now.
Yeah. Okay.
Baby steps.
No, grandpa style is a nice way of brewing, but it suits certain teas, and it's sort of like as the name suggests.
Yeah.
It's sort of the old school way of just
Okay.
like having a cup and just filling with water. And if you have really good teas, it can be very forgiving and allow you to do that.
Right.
But there's only certain teas that I think that works
Okay.
for. So it really, like, ultimately, to get the best experience out of a tea, you're going to want to take the water away from the leaf, right? So you brew it and then you pour the water away and then you leave the leaf to sort of steam and sort of, evaporate moisture so
Yeah.
that it's ready for more infusions.
Okay.
Yeah? So you can see this is probably about a minute in. I'm going to start brewing this. Now with gongfu style, normally you would rinse the leaf first, and we're going to talk about that in the next video,
Okay, fine.
like all the different steps.
Okay. The technique as well.
Yeah, but
Cool.
have a sniff if you'd like.
Yeah.
It's a black tea. I just thought I'd test
I
it
like
with a
this
black
one.
tea
I have
because
tried this before.
have you tried it,
I
Tom?
feel like I think so.
I feel like I think so. I guess you have. You probably have. And some people go crazy and they put even more leaf than that. I'm just sort
Okay.
of giving you like an average. There's a
Yeah.
bit more water in there. And this style of brewing actually sort of was invented not that long ago, a few hundred years ago, which in the world of tea is quite a
Yeah.
long time. And
Long
it was,
time or short time?
sorry, short time, yeah. And the reason why it was invented was because it was around the time when oolong teas were invented, and people had this desire to maintain the fragrance of it, and also the area was quite poor.
Oh, okay.
And so they wanted to try to get the most out of their
Yeah.
leaves, so they shrunk the teaware down, and therefore they could sort of get rich tea from small containers. So I'm pouring this one off first. We put this to the side, and then we're going to pour this one. So that's been a lot longer, and you can still see that it's a lot lighter still.
That's the same tea? The leaves look very different.
Exactly the same tea.
Wow.
Well, it's a good point. Let's just put this to the side. The reason why the leaf looks different is because this has had longer to extract. And so the water is penetrating
Right.
the leaves and making it unfurl. You can see this one's got a lot more to give.
Okay.
So when I talked about the orchestras, like,
Right,
you're pushing
yeah.
the leaf to they're going to get exhausted much
Okay.
quicker. These leaves are just starting.
Okay.
And you're getting a richer brew, as you can see here, from leaves that still have got a lot to give.
Okay. They smell different.
How different?
That one's a bit deeper.
Deeper?
Yeah, that.
This one?
Yeah.
As in sort of stronger? Yeah, so again, richer smell. It's gonna everything is gonna be richer when you have more leaf. The smell, the texture, the taste. Well, you're just picking up more of the character of the tea.
Right.
Here it's a bit light, you know? And you could brew this one longer, and you could sort of maybe get to the point where you would match colours. But believe me, you can test it yourself. It's never, ever going to match the same richness. So I'm just going to pour both in here. And you can A/B them. Here you go.
Thank you.
So that's Western versus gongfu. I'm going to taste it myself.
What's the etiquette? Do I have to wait for you to drink?
No, you don't.
Okay, we're not cheering.
You can.
We're too cool
one
for that.
etiquette is that you tap your finger when somebody serves you. That's one of the etiquettes.
As a thank you?
As a thank you,
Okay.
yeah. It comes from an old parable about an emperor who went to visit his people, and he wanted to go incognito, and he served tea for one of his servants, and the servant was so like, oh my God, how do I, what do I say to the emperor? So he tried to bow with his fingers.
Oh.
That's the story. Anyway, so you're bowing with your fingers. Anyway, let's try Western. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
I mean, it's, it has some taste, it has some body, but compare that against the gongfu style.
Okay.
And also note the difference in the mouth and the aftertaste.
Yeah, it's a lot stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you understand the difference between sort of strength as in terms of loudness versus richness? It also has a thicker, in my view, a thicker feel in the mouth. Everything just feels richer.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that you need to sort of do, is you need to decide if you're going to be, at what point along this spectrum you're going to be. Are you going to go for something that's rich, but you're going to have a long deep session that's going to last maybe an hour?
Yeah.
Or are you going to go lighter, less rich, but more convenient, like quicker, and you're out of the room?
Fine.
Not quicker as in like brewing quicker, but like you're going to get one infusion and that's it.
Does it also depend on the mood you're in as well?
It's very rare that I'm in a mood that I wouldn't choose a richer
Okay.
tea. It's like, do you want your food to be more flavorful? Or do you want a sauce to be reduced down so that it's like got really good texture and taste? Or do you want it to be a bit watery?
Okay.
Again, differs on the tea. Some teas are suited a little bit more towards this, but we're not going to get involved in that. Overall, I highly recommend the biggest change that you can make to your tea brewing method is increase the leaf, reduce the size, because obviously if you used a big Western style pot, you're going to be putting so much leaf in order to get this leaf to water ratio. So you do need to buy some gongfu TEAWARE that shrinks it down, and then use more leaf to water ratio. Okay, so we're back in this orchestra, right?
Yeah.
You've chosen the size of your orchestra, right? You know how loud you want them to play, right? Now, the final decision you've got is temperature of water, right? And temperature of water relates to the EQ balance of the tea. So like, how you have on those old school hi-fis, you've got bass and mid and treble? You've never...
I'm too young for that.
Damn, showing my age. But you know what bass is and treble is, right? So there's a spectrum of like different equalizations, it's called, right? So balance, basically. Right. Sometimes you might go to a club, for example, and you hear like, I'm getting into the youth, right? You go to a club and you're hearing
Not
like...
discotheque.
Look around you, yeah? I think I win. I'm surrounded by vinyl here and decks. But anyway, so you might go to a club and it's very bassy. It's like really, really bassy and it feels like unclear, muffled, right? And then you might go and it's like really like tinny and like hard on the ear, right? So the balance, right? In an orchestra, let's say you've got as a conductor, you're choosing which musicians are playing and how loud. So you know, if you've got these like cellos or very bassy things, like how loud are they playing versus something versus like a piccolo, something that's very, very high and shrill, right? So in essence, the reason why temperature affects the EQ is because the temperature affects how quickly the compounds in the leaf are extracted.
Oh, wow.
So you've got lots of different compounds that all have different flavors, like different sounds, let's say, right? And if you brew very hot, they all play.
Okay.
Right? They're all coming out because they extract.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas if you cool down the water, some of them are like, yeah, I can extract at this temperature.
Okay.
Right? Others, they find it harder to come out.
Okay.
So you can therefore attenuate and control certain tones and notes in the tea.
Do they come out at a later stage, or is it just depends on the temperature of the water?
Very good question. A bit of both.
Okay.
Basically, there are some compounds that it doesn't matter how. If you brew it in cold water, they're never coming out.
Okay.
Right? But if you're brewing at the sort of temperatures that we're talking about, which is sort of 70 degrees Celsius, like 165 Fahrenheit up to boiling point, they'll usually come out, but you're going to have to brew it for a really, really long time.
Okay.
So another analogy that might make sense is imagine all of these flavors or compounds are like runners around a track at the Olympics. Brewing with hot water is like a 100-meter race.
Okay.
So they're all going to cross the line pretty much around the same time, right?
Yeah.
Whereas brewing with colder water is like a long distance race.
Okay.
They spread out, right?
Okay.
So they're going to cross the finish line like further apart, which means that when you pour the water off, when you do this and you're taking the water away, you are sort of selecting which compounds are in there and you're leaving some behind.
Okay. Why would you leave some behind?
Because you might want, there might be a tea which is quite bitter, for example.
Yeah.
And you want to say, I don't want that bitterness in my tea, or I want to reduce the bitterness. And a perfect example of that is green tea. And everyone says, brew green tea at cooler temperature. You may have heard that before. And the reason that is often said is because otherwise it burns the leaves. That's just bullshit.
Okay.
That's just not true.
Is it just a taste thing?
It's essentially because green tea has a lot of bitter compounds in there. And so the bitter compounds extract at hotter temperatures.
Okay.
So if you cool down the temperature, you're going to get some of them coming out, but not a lot of them. And so therefore you're going to get to taste the sort of the nice parts of the green tea and leave the bits that you maybe want to leave out. Okay. And again, this is all personal taste. Some people prefer it more bitter. And so temperature, just like EQ, some people like to listen to very bass heavy.
Yeah.
Some people like it to be very clean and clear. Yes. The temperature is very personal.
Okay.
So whatever I tell you, experiment.
Yeah.
But in essence, you're changing the balance.
Okay.
Right? Of the taste. And we're going to do that test here. So here we've got 2 green teas, right? And I'm going to brew one at like what I would recommend, like 80-degree water.
Yeah.
And I'm going to brew one at boiling point.
Okay.
Therefore, you can sort of understand what I mean, like sensorially, rather than just in theory. Okay, so this is now at 80 degrees. Let me just put a little bit of cold water in just to reduce it down a bit further, because this tea is very, very sensitive. And we want to really bring out the freshness of the tea, but not bring out the bitter notes.
Again, it's the same tea.
It's the same tea and the same amount now. So now we've everything is the same. So we're going to brew this, and I'm going to have to act quickly here and sort of remember how long I brewed this for, but we'll brew it for about 30 seconds.
What's the things coming out of it?
So all of this sort of furriness is, you saw that the buds themselves have a lot of fluff on them.
Right. Okay.
That was because they're very young leaves.
Right.
They still have that sort of buddy material. You can see how sort of fluffy it is. So we're going to bring this up to boiling point, and then we'll brew it. And I will brew it probably a little bit shorter because, as I said, every point in this triangle, you move one and it changes. So obviously when you're brewing hotter, it's going to extract quicker, so you want to probably reduce it down a little bit. So now this is boiling point water, right? So we're going to pour this in. And you'll actually see that it's going to extract a lot quicker as well. So we'll take this one out now.
How long did you leave it in there?
This was about, what, 40 seconds?
Okay.
But, I mean, I would probably leave it normally a bit less, but I know you're only going to get to taste this. We're going to only get to taste one infusion of it.
Okay.
Because if I was brewing this and I was knowing I was going to do lots of sessions, then I'd want to get that first sort of taste on my palate to be something quite light and then get a bit stronger.
Okay. Why did you not wash that out first?
Because I want to be relatively quick here.
Oh, right, okay. But would you wash it otherwise if you had time?
With green teas, I tend to be less... The purpose of washing the leaf we'll get onto in the next video, but essentially you want to prime it. And because these are very delicate leaves, they require less priming. So you can see here a difference in the colour, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just in terms of strength, but it's because you're extracting different things.
Okay.
And you can also see here how the leaf has extracted. See how much higher that is compared to that one? So you can see that that's extracted faster as well, even though I brewed it for a shorter period of time, which is what I'm saying, like, you know, there's always going to be a movement here. Okay.
Do you know what it looks like, the ideal? Like how much the leaves will have expanded, if it's like ideal taste for you? Can you ever
I can normally tell by the color of the liquor. I already know that that's going to be a bit more bitter than I would want. Let's just rinse your cups here. Go on. You want to see the frog?
I'm obsessed with this frog.
Okay, put him in the middle, and then you can do the honor. Pour the rinse on the frog.
Oh, on there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's serve you some tea brewed at 80 degrees. And that will be much easier to drink, okay. So you should go for that one first.
Yeah.
Versus boiling point. And I'll taste it too. Too late.
Oh, so I'm supposed to do it beforehand?
When I'm pouring.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, this is green coil. For those of you interested, this is Bilo Chen.
Yeah.
Springs.
Yeah, I love
spring-like, right?
Yeah.
Like waking up in a nice dewy meadow. Okay.
That's lovely.
And the finish is sort of still relatively soft. Of course, it's drying slightly, but it's not too like aggressive.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
This is going to be hot. It's the bitterness at the end. I've only just tried a bit. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've done a lot of tea at home.
Like that. Like that. Yeah.
I'm like, it's a little bit too bitter. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. It must be the wrong equipment, not me.
Yeah. No, it's you. It's you.
Yeah, this one's definitely more bitter.
Yeah. So, and also notice it also leaves the tongue a bit furrier.
Yeah,
right?
I've really experienced this a lot.
A lot of people.
Wasted tea. What?
Well, a lot of people have. It's it's fundamental that you get the right temperature.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then as I said, you can get great tea and ruin it.
Yeah.
And that's especially the case for green teas.
Okay.
Because they're very sensitive. But we'll talk about sort of the considerations very, very soon.
Okay.
But yeah, big difference in terms of texture. Yeah, feel free, of course. Big difference in terms of texture and taste. And that is simply because hotter water is extracting more, right? So it's like getting the orchestra to just go, everyone play.
Yeah.
Right?
It's too loud.
And you're not getting this sort of subtlety, you're not hearing the notes, you're not, it's just too much going on at the same time.
Yeah.
And so with teas that are delicate like this, you kind of like, it just becomes overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right? But it's not because you're burning the leaf, which again is a very common misconception. It's like you've scorched the leaf.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with that. It's just rates of extraction.
Okay. All the compounds are coming out.
They're all coming out at the same time, including ones that you don't necessarily want. Or maybe you want a little bit of some physicality, a little bit of bitterness, but you want it only a certain amount. You don't want it all to come out, right? Yeah. So figuring out your temperature is for that purpose. So those are the three things that you need to think of. Leaf to water ratio, richness, time, like how loud you want them to play, right? And temperature is the EQ balance.
Okay, got it.
All right, we're going to clear this away. We're going to bring out the loose leaf tea so that I can sort of give you some basic guidelines.
Got it.
Okay, so we've talked about the different parameters, the 3 different parameters, leaf to water ratio, time, and temperature. Those are the most important ones. As I said, we could talk about TEAWARE, shape of TEAWARE, and lots of other things, but that's for the masterclasses. But all of that is sort of just information floating around, right? You want to sort of base it on something practical.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to do that because, again, it's down to taste and it's down to every tea is going to be slightly different. But I'm going to try to put some guides up for everyone out there so that you can see some starting points, but they are starting points, right? The most important thing is don't get stuck to rules, experiment.
Fine.
So let's talk about leaf to water ratio. How much leaf should you put in, right? It's pretty much dependent mostly on the shape of the leaf.
Shape, okay.
Yeah, so light and fluffy teas like this one here, you see how light and fluffy this is? You're going to be using less leaf because it's less dense,
right,
compared to like quite dense balls like this one, right? So for light fluffy teas, you're talking about sort of 2 to 3%. And what I mean by that is, so if you have 100 ml of water, or 100 grams of water, you'd use about 2 to 3 grams, right? 2 to 3%.
Oh, okay, fine.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you were taking something like this, you'd be using sort of 7 to 8%, something like that. And sort of in between these ones, you'd be looking at around sort of 5%.
Okay.
Right?
What about these?
So this one here is very broken, right? And so even though it may look a little bit fluffy, it's actually quite dense, right? Because it's all sort of flattened, you can see. So therefore, for this one, you're probably going to be using somewhere in the region of about 4%.
Okay.
But in essence, for gongfu style brewing, you're sort of looking between 3 grams up to sort of 8 grams per 100 ml of water. So 3% up to 8%.
Right.
Right? And it depends. So you would use more leaf if it was denser.
Yeah.
You would use less leaf if it was fluffier.
Okay.
Right? That's, a sort of very basic starting point, but, you feel free to experiment. And as I said, there's nothing... It's better to err on the side of putting too much leaf than too little. Okay. Right? Okay. It's better for you to put too much and then just control your brewing time. Yeah. Because if you put too little, you might just make a very sort of a tea which lacks richness. Okay. So for leaf to water ratio, the shape of the leaf is the more important thing, not the color of the leaf, right? Now, for the temperature, the color of the leaf is the more important thing. Okay. So I said green teas are very sensitive. Yeah. The greener the leaf, the cooler you should go. Okay. Yeah. Right? And when I say green, I mean greener. I don't mean lighter. So for example, I would brew this one, which is greener, at a cooler temperature than I would this one. Oh, right. Okay. Right? It's not lightness, it's greenness. Okay. And the reason for that is that light buds like this are buds usually, right? The very young leaves are the ones that are going to go green if they're processed, in an unoxidized way. And those young leaves contain more of the bitter notes. Okay, got it. Because those young leaves, remember at the very beginning, when we talk about the leaf, those young leaves are trying to protect themselves from the sun. Okay, yeah. So they produce this antioxidant, which acts like a sunscreen, and that is the taste of bitterness. Okay. Right? So the opposite to humans, basically. The older we get, the bitter we get, but it's the other way around. That's how I'm going to remember it. It's a good way of remembering it. Okay, so greener is cooler, and then as it sort of moves into this sort of whites and golds, it gets a bit hotter, and as you get into the darker territory, you can go hot. You can go to boiling point. Fine. But let's say you've got these two here. These are both black teas, right? But you can see much larger leaf and much smaller leaf, right? So even though I just said you could brew these hot, I would also say if it looks small leaf like that, I would sort of brew it a little bit cooler. So for example, that I might brew at 99 degrees, that I would brew at 95, right? So I would just drop it a little bit because it is smaller leaf. Again, smaller leaf, younger leaf is going to have more of those bitter notes in them. Yeah, even though it's processed as a black tea, it's still going to have a bit more. So, primary thing to look at when you do your temperature is color.
Yeah.
But then if you've got two teas that the same color, but one's like definitely much bigger than another, I would still say if it's a smaller leaf, just drop it down by a few degrees.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this 99 roughly.
Yeah.
And
roughly.
then
that one sort of around 95, maybe even 93 or something like that.
And for those that haven't got, like myself, like a measuring like temperature, how would you measure it in terms of?
So the easiest way to do it is, get a temperature control kettle, and actually there's lots of them on the market now.
Okay.
So it's not like it used to be. It's not some specialist bit of gear.
Oh, really?
You can get temperature control kettles everywhere
now.
Oh,
okay.
And they're great because you set it, you walk away, or in the case of this one, you can see the temperature there, so you can just see what it is. It may not bring it to it and hold it at that temperature, but at least you can see the temperature. Okay. But if you don't have that, then obviously let the kettle reach boil, and its boiling point, and then just add some cold water.
Okay.
Right, to cool it down.
Percentage.
And percentage is actually much more than you think. So to bring the temperature down to something like 80 degrees, you need to sort of add like a third of the water that's in the kettle. So let's say you had a liter of boiling water in a kettle, you would add something like about 300 ml of cold water to bring it down. So it's actually a lot more than you think. A lot of people think, I just put a little splash in. No, you need to put a fair amount in to bring it down.
Do you then mix it around in the kettle?
No, usually it'll bring it down.
And how much for this again? What percentage?
So are you talking about the temperature of the water? So for this one here, so I would be brewing these around 80, moving up to sort of 93 degrees. And then here I'd be moving to sort of 100, like 95 to 99. Maybe this one would be 95, that would be 99. These ones I'd be brewing at 95 to 99 degrees. So, I mean, look, experiment, right? But, you know, the basic rule is to not really mess up your teas. If it's green and it's small leaf, cool down. Right? And then the final thing to think about is how long you brew it for. And the length of time of brewing really relates to, again, the shape. Because smaller leaf is going to be more easily penetrated by the water, right? It has less protection. Buds like this, right? You can see they've got a lot of fur on them. It's going to take a lot of time for the water to get in. So small leaf or broken leaf in this case, shorter. And as the leaf becomes gnarlier, bigger, more sort of clearly sort of larger leaves or buds, you're extending the
What
time.
about the ones like these too?
So these ones are essentially large leaves like this rolled up. So you're going to be brewing for a longer period of time. But one of the interesting things with this is that the first infusion, you're going to actually brew longer. And then as you brew subsequent infusions, actually you reduce it because now it's opened up. And then you start to increase it. So normally so apart from these teas, you would start with a time, and every time you brew a subsequent infusion, you keep the same temperature. You've obviously keeping the same leaf to water ratio because you're not changing it, and then you're just adding time. Right? Whereas with these ones, these bull roll oolongs, the first one is going to be a bit longer, and then you're going to drop it in terms of time, and then start to ramp up. Right? But, you know, again, this is sort of very advanced stuff. Basically, you're just adding time. And the amount of time that you add, it sort of it really comes down to feel, but, you know, probably about, 10 seconds or so per infusion. So every time add another 10 seconds. So by your 10th infusion, you might be brewing for like 2 minutes, right? Which would be similar to like a Western style brew. But at that point, the leaf has given up so much, the orchestra has played so much, you need to like crank up the volume there. So that's the basics. So time is related mostly to shape. So small leaf and broken leaf, shorter periods of time. As it becomes more like fluffy and protected and bigger, you increase the time. But ultimately, this all boils down to feel and experience. And that's the most important thing. People get very hung up on like, oh, am I brewing it correct to instructions? Like, the whole beauty of tea is that you are having a personal relationship with the tea.
Yeah.
You are learning the leaf. You are learning your preference and what flavors you want to get out of the leaf.
Yeah.
And that is a journey that needs intuition, it needs feeling, it needs experience, and is not something that can just be sort of given to you as a chart.
Okay.
Right?
That makes
Which
sense.
brings us to the next video, which is going to be all about you brewing tea for me.
Okay.
Right? So I'm going to give you this guy one. You're going to take this home with you.
Great.
Right? Because you need to practice with
Pretty
that.
one.
Yeah. It's the gongfu.
Yeah.
Gongfu forever.
Okay.
Guy one. So that is going to be your homework.
Yep.
You can watch a video. There's videos on YouTube
Okay.
where I show you how to use it.
Fine.
I can also show you, but you can just watch.
I'll watch.
And
Take notes.
and learn how to pour with it.
Practice. Yeah.
And then in the next episode, we are going to be breaking down a gongfu session from beginning to end, so go through all of the steps
Okay.
of how to brew the tea.
Cool.
Yeah?
Sounds good. Cannot wait.
You will be burning your hands during practice, but that's a rite of passage.
Okay,
That's
got it.
the way it has to be. All right, that's it, tea heads. Check out our other videos, taste our teas wherever you're around the world by browsing mayleaf.com, and come visit us if you're ever in London. Other than that, this is Halter.
Bye, guys.
And I'm Don from Mayleaf. Thank you for being a part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags, keep drinking the good stuff, and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea.
Take care. See
Bye.
you soon. Bye.